In episode 4, Hays County Judge Ruben Becerra discusses the role of society and its systems, what currently is taking place, and his plan for a mental health care facility for Hays County. Judge Becerra, how are you today?
I'm doing great. Thank you for asking.
Thank you so much for agreeing to do this podcast. So, how long have you been a judge?
I have been a judge, the county judge, for 2 years.
And what does your day-to-day look like?
My day-to-day is, for example, Monday, I was in constitutional court. It's the court that folks may think about when they think of the word judge, the title judge. I was in a black robe and I had the privilege of representing the state. And I was listening to the DPS telling me why I should suspend someone's license. And I had the individual at the podium explaining to me what took place and really why I shouldn't suspend their license. That was a real privilege for me to be a sympathetic ear in that space, because very often what our society is missing is people that can relate to someone else in a position that's a little more challenging at the moment. And so I'm just glad to be there with the experience and the skill sets that I've acquired through life. That's my morning on Monday. And then I just go on and I had an emergency management meeting, and not only the county judge, but I also serve as the director of emergency management, director of Homeland Security, and the chair of the court, of course, the commissioner's court.
So what's your favorite thing about the work that you do?
That I influence people's lives in a positive manner. To me, the most important thing is meaningful work. If you don't feel like you're impacting someone's lives in a positive manner, or even your own, really, I feel that it's less rewarding and you'll be less motivated. And the things I do on a daily basis are affecting people's lives in ways that I could have never imagined. And I'm just humbled and honored for the privilege.
And what do you think is probably the most challenging or the most frustrating thing about your work?
The bureaucracy and the foot dragging that goes on within the government. People need help now. People need support now. We've had systems in place that have been deliberately deceptive and designed to give people less of a fighting chance. And I just don't find it useful to have politics over public health, or having people playing politics exclusively for the benefit of political gain. I find that very discouraging and disappointing.
Have you noticed a link between mental illness and incarceration in your time as being a judge or in your time working within the government?
Well, I will say mental health is such a rampant issue and concern in our society as a whole that when folks end up incarcerated, if they weren't dealing with something already, that's definitely going to exacerbate their situation, create anxiety, create tension, or expand on whatever issues they're dealing with. So I consider it of little to no help to have a mental health crisis and then sticking them in a jail. So yes, I've become more aware of it since becoming a judge more than ever. We're all on a scale at some point in our mental health. So those that are close to the edge, going into jail is definitely not a help.
Do you think there are any external factors that may exacerbate those causes?
External factors where?
Within the jails and within society.
So I believe that within society, we have this survival mechanism that we are supposed to make assumptions. Those kind of assessments are useful for preservation of life. Don't get next to that big furry animal because it's going to eat you up. So I believe that those stereotypes and those generalizations don't stop when it comes to people. And so as the first Latino county judge, I have firsthand experience with racism, discrimination, and everything you hear about. I've lived it firsthand. It's alive and well. I've seen it all my life. And people make assumptions and generalizations about me, about you, about everyone, whether they decide before they've seen us for more than 10 seconds, they've decided if we're friendly, if we're mean, if we're out to get them, if we're out to help them. Very often people in my position, I'm in a very unique position because I'm a worker. I work for a living. I've worked all my life. Now I happen to be the county judge. It's what I do. It's not who I am. So very often I come to the realization that small groups, I will never generalize because broader the statement, the narrower the mind. Certain individuals, certain groups will say, we don't want to hear from you. And it's kind of disappointing, but I'm an eternal optimist. So I keep going and I remember that it's only the micro few, but people like me, just minorities in general, workers in general, the poor, I'm including myself in that space. They don't want to hear from us. Stay put, stay quiet, just do the work. So I'm in a very unique situation when you ask me that question, because societally, we have had systems in place, not necessarily intended to undermine us per se, but definitely when you don't have the vantage point of the recipient of some of these laws and policies and everything else going on, that's inadvertently what could easily take place when you don't have someone at the table that looks like they don't represent that policy. And so systematically, societally, it's alive and well. As much as we have a lot of great people trying, there's still a few rotten apples in the system. And then in the jail system, I believe wholeheartedly that we are like plants. We need sunlight, we need fresh air, we need decent food, and we need human interaction in some capacity, even the human touch. So the design of our current jails is truly throwing someone in a cellar away from all of the things I've just described. I feel that putting someone that is alive and is interacting in this universe and in this world like the rest of us, placed in a space that restricts or eliminates almost all of the things I've described, can only hurt, can't help.
I think we can all agree that jails and prisons are not ideal for those with mental illness. However, sometimes that's the only option. So I inquire, how is the criminal justice system currently treating and handling those with mental illness that are in their facilities?
Sadly, everything is overloaded in the mental illness capacity. If we have a mental illness issue, they have to wait days, sometimes weeks, sometimes months to get an assessment. And where they sit with a mental illness is very often in jail because the state has cut funding on our state funded institutions. And so they're being eliminated, they're being privatized. And I'm being general, of course. You can point to something that points to contrary, but generally speaking, underfunded and overworked people in a setting that is from the 19th century, and really very little to nothing has changed. And so we have police officers, we have deputies driving people to Kerrville, driving people to other parts of the state just to try to find a hospital bed for them because there is nothing around. And so that's one of the things I'm working on is a mental health facility for Hays County.
Yes. Speaking of the mental health facility for Hays County, was there like a specific action or incidents that sparked the consideration of this, or is it just the overall things that you've described?
Well, I've always known about mental illness and the mental health component in everyone's lives to a low layman's degree. But as I've been made more aware through my position of how dire things actually are in that lane, it has become exceptionally clear to me that more needs to be done. During the freeze that we all remember very easily, I went out with our director of Veterans Affairs and I said, help me to go to all the spots where we know people hang out, under bridges, in coves, in the woods, and everywhere. And he and I went just before the freeze came in hard, everywhere through our community, looking for people that were looking for shelter, needing shelter, and we wanted to help them. That experience helped me not only to really stake a flag into this effort of mine to bring a mental health hospital to Hays County, but also a VA wing. My admin is a Navy vet, and she has to go all the way to Kerrville. She has to go deep south San Antonio. I mean, it's at least an hour drive for her to see a provider. That's not the way to treat our people that have fought to help us and live the life that we live and the privilege that we overall have. everything affects everyone differently. And even you and I could be looking at the same exact thing and take two different assessments of it.
Yeah.
And so going through the freeze, if you were hungry or if you were cold or if you had no power, if you had all of the above, if you were already stressed because of COVID, well, any one of those moments can push you over the edge and something happen that's not useful to you or your existence here. And so
Sure.
it's our job, I feel, as a community, as a government, to help, especially if we helped create the situation.
Judge Becerra mentioned bringing a mental health care facility to Hays County. But what is the process of getting one started?
The very first thing I've done is, because government moves so slow, because a lot of people in power don't want to give it up and fight at all costs to keep their crown. And it's unfortunate, regardless of who it affects or how it hurts people. But the first thing I wanted to do for maximizing time's sake is to get the assessments that have already been done in our region looped in so we could see what people know already about Hays County and the surrounding areas in regards to our need, our number of beds we could use, and what a facility would look like, and how varied within mental health we could create one, because we have an alternative for a jail, for example. So that would need to be a very secure wing of this operation. And there's one that could be just educational, or it could be just a weekend event for someone. And so there needs to be true assessment to which each condition needs a footprint and a bed of support for. And so those assessments, I looped in Texas State University, the Uvalde folks who have a 48-bed facility drawn up already, and they're further along than us. I looped in New Braunfels folks through the McKenna Foundation, have done research and help support some of that research. And so reaching out and seeing who, what, where, when, and why, and then bringing the medical professionals in, the psychologists, the psychiatrists, the people in the justice system. I looped in our DA. My hope and goal was to create a roundtable, put everybody around it so that we could start getting a lay of the land most efficiently.
So, with this mental health care facility, would there be a monetary cost to people that are trying to use it, or how would that get paid for?
So my hope is that through corporate sponsorships and donors and federal, state, and local tax dollars already paid for, my goal is not to raise tax dollars, as we already pay a lot of taxes. So I just think we need to reevaluate how we're spending them and find ways to be more efficient and useful to the community we're charged with serving. So reallocation of some of those funds. For example, just last year, I peeled more than $3 million off of our outsourcing of inmates budget. And so that over $3 million being wasted year after year, not to mention all those lives, those beating hearts that were out and spread out throughout the state, with no one to see them. Not even their general counsel could effectively go visit them, because it was at least an hour one way to go visit them. And when it's court-appointed attorney, it's not worth the attorney to drive out there. So it just makes things worse. So we already have a very monetarily challenged community. And so my hope is, through all those federal, state, local contributors and other avenues, and then reassessment of budget dollars, and then making transactional relationships with the neighboring counties to contribute. My plan is that it costs the user no money.
And with the consideration of the mental health care facility, how would that interact with a mental health court?
So we've established a mental health court, but we never used it. And we could find 12 reasons why we didn't use it. But at the end of the day, we didn't do anything useful with it. And so we have a new judge in that lane, and her name is Judge Thompson, Millie Thompson. And my hope is that she will embrace that court and utilize it as it was designed, because when she got into office, it had not been used once. What a disappointment. I can't wait till that steps in, because I feel that getting people into a rehabilitation lane is way more useful than just incarceration with no end in sight or with no real value to anyone. Because if you've not addressed why they're in there, then there's no reason to continue to keep them in there, ruining their lives and burning taxpayer dollars.
And if you don't mind me asking, what were some of the reasons of why it hadn't been utilized?
Well, the judge that was over that court was appointed because it was a new position. And maybe that's why she lost her election. I don't know exactly. I don't want to speculate, but she was appointed to the seat, to that court that we had created. And then she was running for election because she hadn't been elected. And I feel that maybe the community potentially saw that that space wasn't being utilized and it cost her her race. Other than that, I really don't know not only why they weren't using it, but I can tell you that change has taken place. And so I'm just optimistic.
Okay. We know that mental health courts have benefits, as you mentioned before, of providing treatment instead of just sticking someone in a cell. But would there be any drawbacks to having a mental health?
I don't believe so. I believe it's an elaborate cite and divert program, in my opinion, where we have an opportunity to take someone that's having a unique challenge, pulling them off to the side and working with them with a little more care so that they continue to go in that space.
Wrapping up, since we know that there is an issue in trying to get this mental health care facility started and then actually using the mental health court, I know that getting a mental health care facility started, it takes a lot of steps. So if officials decide not to move forward with the implementation, would there be an alternative plan, or what would be like the next steps to resolve the issue or find other ways to help these people out?
Well, if we don't provide a useful roadmap, which is what I'm working on, to create a facility to help folks, truly help them, not just lock them up, then we're going to continue down the path that we've always been on, which is clearly inadequate. And so my hope is that once we get the clear roadmap from the professionals, I'm just an enabler at this point on bringing them together. I'm bringing the talent, I'm bringing the horsepower, I'm bringing the experience together so that we can create a roadmap that is complete, cohesive, and specific to our footprint. And then I want to engage the community, encourage, no, demand action. And so when it comes to my commissioner's court, there are 4 other commissioners. I'm the county judge, and then there's 4 commissioners. And together, the 5 of us, all we need is 3 to vote to support this effort. And then it becomes reality. And so putting pressure on elected officials, and if they don't represent your interests, if they don't do that you find most useful, well, then you have an opportunity to vote them out.
I know this might be kind of a out there question, knowing all of the steps that it would take, but would there be a projected timeline of implementation, or would be the ideal time to see this actually put into action?
So I have approximately hit the midpoint of my term. I have a little less than 2 years left. My hope is that this has been at least solidified and a roadmap in place before my term is up. So within the next year, I would hope that we have a roadmap that is not only workable, agreeable, but also in motion.
Well, that sounds amazing. Once again, I just wanted to thank you so much for your time and just for all the hard work that you're doing for Hays County.
Well, thank you so much. And I really appreciate you reaching out, because it's awareness. Knowledge is power. Awareness of the things going on and those elected officials that affect those decisions and the things that you want to have done to accomplish in your community that you need to make a crumb trail to, so that if they doing what you want, doing what you think is important, representing the greater good, well, then vote them back in. And if they're not, vote them out. And so you're a key part of that, informing folks. That is essential to our well-being as a community. So thank you for what you're doing.
Thank you.
Have a wonderful day.
All right, you too.